Hi students, welcome to the second half of the class. Welcome to the Industrial Revolution, which is a fascinating but a complex topic. And so here I'm going to try and give you an overview, and then you can use the textbook readings, the PowerPoints, the videos to fill out your knowledge. And the Industrial Revolution is the other huge revolution that takes place in the 18th and into the 19th centuries that we're covering in this class. We ended the first half of the class talking about the Enlightenment Revolutions. The revolution in thinking when it comes to the Enlightenment, the American Revolution, the French Revolution, these new approaches to political order and an attempt to change the political order of the time. And now we come to the Industrial Revolution, which possibly has an even bigger impact on changing the social order, the established social order of the time. What's interesting as we move forward in our class and we think about some of the themes in our class is that whereas with the Enlightenment, we have this thinking that encourages social independence, encourages individuals to think of themselves as more autonomous, more free to construct the political realities that they want, the political structures that they want. The Industrial Revolution encourages economic dependence, where individuals, as a result of the Industrial Revolution, become more dependent on things like supply chains, materials that are coming from outside the area where they live. And so at the same time as we have social independence that's being promoted by Enlightenment thinking, we have economic dependence that's being promoted by the Industrial Revolution. We're also going to see the growth in dominant Western influence in the whole of the world, a world that's increasingly connected, it's increasingly dominated by the West because of Western science and technology. And the Industrial Revolution, just to kind of complete my introduction here, continues to play an enormous role in shaping our lives today. It shapes sorts of possessions that we have, even the idea that we all have laptops, we all have televisions. It's kind of a product of the systems and approaches of the Industrial Revolution. It shapes our approaches to work and family life. It shapes our understanding, our basic traditional understanding, what's now a traditional understanding of the relationship between home and work, and the relationship between an employer and employees. And now I can talk about this in terms of the traditional understanding. But it is in fact based on this revolution in society and economics that takes place in the 18th and the 19th centuries. So that's what I'm going to get into now. And first we have to talk a little bit about what the economy was like prior to the Industrial Revolution in Europe. We have the fall of the Roman Empire, we have a drastic decline in the economic output across Europe. And instead, most people turn to subsistence farming. They grow what they need in order to survive, in order to feed themselves, but not much beyond that. During the medieval period, so from about 600 to about 1300, we're going to see the economic growth across Europe. And this is made possible through a couple of things. Increased political stability and warming climates mean that crop yields are larger and are more secure, and this encourages the growth of trade. Then the medieval economy is turned upside down in the 14th century by, again, a changing climate. Climate across the world starts to get colder, decreases crop production. And you have the Black Death. And the Black Death is the most important, but there are other disasters at the same time that lead to a loss of life, big loss of life. And the way the population changes also changes the economic setup of Europe. It means that instead of having a large population where crops were very expensive and where there was a low demand for labor, instead you start to have a smaller population. A smaller population is actually a little wealthier, because a smaller population means that the price of crops, the price of food, has decreased. So you have about the same amount of land that's under cultivation, you have a smaller population to feed, demand for crops is lower, price of crops is lower. That means that a lot of the people who survive the Black Death have more resources, have more money to spend purchasing things or developing interests beyond simply the food that they need to survive. And so this is the situation around 1650 when we find the precursor to the Industrial Revolution, which is the Agricultural Revolution. So from about 1650 to about 1800, we see a massive rise in agricultural production. And this is absolutely central and fundamental to the Industrial Revolution. And it's made possible by a couple of innovations in agriculture. First is the addition of a fourth crop. So up until this point, medieval farming or pre-modern farming was based on rotating 3 crops. The addition of a fourth crop, a winter crop, typically a root vegetable, not only provides more food, but it actually revitalizes the soil. The nutrients from that crop revitalize the soil. This is something pre-Columbian Americans understood way before Europeans. But Europeans start to adopt this approach. And it means that they're producing more food, that the soil is richer and is more productive generally. At the same time, you see the targeted breeding of animals, which means you have bigger cows and pigs producing more meat. You have sheep that are producing more wool, and you have improved instruments. New and more efficient plows, new and more efficient seed drills make the planting of seeds much more efficient and much more productive. So agriculture is becoming more productive. It's also becoming less reliant on labor. The seed drill and the plow, as you'll see, mean that the labor that was done previously by a lot of hired hands now is done by far fewer workers with the aid of this new technology. And then we also have the enclosure movement. That land that previously had kind of been held in common, where everyone pastured their one cow or their one sheep, is now being taken over by the more wealthy landowners and the more wealthy farmers in the community, who are fencing off this land, that's why it's called enclosure, to be used for the production of their own farms, their own crops, and their own animals. Now, one of the videos that I've given you to look at this week takes a little bit of a sentimental approach to this, or a little bit of an overly sentimental approach to this, and suggests that this is some kind of plot that's designed to disenfranchise the peasants. It's more about just being productive. And actually, at the time, laborers and workers are, at least some of them, are okay with this, because they are more concerned with the wages that they can receive through their work than they are through owning land. At this time, when labor is kind of expensive, again, you have a smaller population, it's more important to be having a job and having wages than it is to have land. But it does mean that the peasants, the laborers, are now very reliant on their employers for work. Okay. So we have the enclosure system. Land is being concentrated in the hands of a smaller number of people. And then we also have these agricultural innovations that are making agriculture more efficient. And so now we have more food and better production of agriculture. And this means that the population, particularly in places where these agricultural techniques are being debuted, in England and Holland especially, the population explodes. And so now you have a huge population at the same time as the demand for labor is decreasing. Okay, I've set up the Industrial Revolution. I'm going to make another video in which I talk a little bit more about the components of the Industrial Revolution. So I'll be back later in this week with, or further on in this week, with another couple of videos about the Industrial Revolution.